Friends, our guest today and inaugural guest for this program, Transit Equity Matters, is Delegate Marc Korman. Delegate Korman is a proven, determined transit advocate. And when you consider the background and the issues that he's addressed as a transit advocate, you can see that we're in good hands, perhaps in this legislative session, with such an advocate. But I also want to make sure that it's known to you, because we're celebrating, along with Delegate Korman, his appointment as the majority leader in the House of Delegates. So first then, Delegate Korman, congratulations. But how does this happen? What will be now how does it happen? And then what will be your principal goals as a majority leader?
Yeah, well, thanks, Samuel. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for all your advocacy over the years. In particular, the last 8 years have been a challenging time, as you well know, for transit in Maryland, and you've helped keep the torch lit. So thank you. Yeah, in Maryland, it's a little different than the national level that folks are familiar with. The majority leader is appointed by the Speaker, so just really excited to work closely with her, Speaker Jones, to carry out the agenda that she's really articulated. But she's been very supportive over the years of our transit work. Back when she was on the Appropriations Committee, she helped support the dedicated funding for the metro system in my part of the state. As Speaker, she's supported us in some of our efforts to bring some common sense to the roadway public-private partnership in my part of the state. She's very, very supportive of removing the fare box recovery requirement on the Baltimore City system that you're so familiar with, increased funding for the Maryland Transit Administration. Safety and maintenance backlog issues was a bill that she helped champion as Speaker, investment in the Marc rail system. So she's been a great leader on transit issues, and I'm really happy to be working with her and the rest of her leadership team to advance those, and a range of other issues, of course, that she's working on, given her the breadth of her responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. Well, we do applaud that sequence and this elevation for you, if we can call it that, as a majority leader. But it also comes at a time when we have a federal administration and hopefully a state administration that will elevate infrastructure projects, infrastructure programs, including mass transit, to an unprecedented priority, not seen in this country since the Eisenhower interstate highway construction era. So we're sort of looking forward to that. Do you see any specific or any advantages or?
I think the timing is promising. It's great that we have a new governor at this moment as these this record federal investment and funds are being unleashed. And, the House and Senate spending affordability committees, which sort of set our overall spending guidelines for the state back in December, asked that some of the surplus be set aside for sort of priority transit and transportation projects. And then we were really excited to see when the governor's budget proposal came out, he set aside $500 million of our sort of surplus, in addition to our, multi-billion-dollar transportation investments we make every year as part of our normal budget, this additional $500 million to act as a down payment. And most of the sort of potential uses for that, most of our mega projects are transit related. It's things related to Marc rail. It's things like the Red Line in Baltimore City, or a revitalized Red Line. It's things like the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit System. Yes. And so there's a lot of great opportunity there. $500 million is a lot of money to you and I. It's not a lot of money in the scope of these projects, but it is a down payment and a really important step. And really great that, both this House and Senate Spending Affordability Committee and the governor saw that as a priority use of surplus dollars to make sure we're making these really necessary long-term investments, which are important, as you said, for equity, but also the environment, economic development. So really important.
Mm-hmm. In the governor's inaugural address, he didn't refer to mass transit. He referred to clean transit, and that's part of the zero emissions strategy for responding to climate change. What do you make of that? Is there anything to make of it that he did not refer to mass transit programs?
Yeah, look, it's early days. I mean, as you know, the term transit, although you and I, take its meaning as what it refers to, is sometimes used interchangeably with transportation, but I wouldn't read too much into that. I think it's early days for Moore administration. I think it's good news that he appointed a multimodal secretary, a secretary who's run both the Maryland Transit Administration and the DC area system, which serves Montgomery and Prince George's County and really the rest of Maryland. So I think the governor's signaled his intentions to champion mass transit, but in terms of what that's specifically going to look like, specific projects, timing, some of the roads, it's early days. I think they're still trying to wrap their arms around some of what was left to them by the prior administration.
So you think it's still true that we don't have yet the new Secretary of Transportation, or at least appointee, Paul Whitefeld? We don't yet know the projects that he will emphasize or the transit policies that he will.
Yeah, I don't think we have the full details. I think we've heard, a lot of, early signs of support for East-West transit in Baltimore City, support for the Southern Maryland transit system. The only concrete thing we've seen, as which is very important to mass transit, is the Douglas Tunnel, the replacement of the BMP Tunnel, which is important for Amtrak and the MARC system. Really promising early sign. Negotiations had frankly been a little bit stalled under the prior administration to move forward with that project. And now, Maryland and Amtrak have signed, a letter together about how that project is going to go forward, what Maryland's financial commitment is going to look like. And, that's really great that was really done within the first couple of weeks of the Moore administration. But a lot more announcements like that, are yet to come on some of these other priority issues that you and I care so much about.
Well, issues that we care about. You have been the lead, and you are the lead sponsor of the Maryland Rail Investment Act. And BTEC supports it, and our statewide coalition, the Maryland Transit Opportunities Coalition, has also written and commented favorably on the bill. But could you share with us the most, in your estimation, the most salient features of the act?
Sure. The purpose of the act is to get at this question of how we're going to build all of these projects that many of us in the General Assembly and around the state want to see move forward, all the projects we've been talking about on this call. The money in our Transportation Trust Fund is not infinite. And of course, the gas tax, which is about 25% of our, the state gas tax, about 25% of our Transportation Trust Fund, is a declining resources in a lot of ways because we're trying to shift people to zero emission vehicles, because of improved mileage in cars. So what this bill does is actually it takes a page out of the public-private partnership model and says tolls can be used to fund transportation investment. We have existing toll facilities in Maryland that are done through the Maryland Transportation Authority. Those tolls were actually cut about 8 years ago by Governor Hogan. What this bill would do is optimize the tolling, so use increased tolls on those roads to fund first the maintenance, of course, on those roads and tunnels and bridges. That has to be taken care of, but then take the excess and put it into a new rail authority, which is mostly a financing mechanism. It's a way to issue bonds that don't count against the state sort of other debt limits that we have for our general obligation bonds, for our Transportation Trust Fund bonding, to get the investment we need for some of these major rail projects. I think the way I envision it, the bill makes it kind of optional, but I think practically speaking, what would most likely happen is the operations of those projects would go with the sort of, most sensible entity. Right now, that's the Maryland Transit Administration. That could change to something else in the future, depending on other legislation out there about a Baltimore Transportation Authority, for example. But this is really a financing mechanism. It's a way to have a group of people in state government who can focus on rail investment, rail construction, rail building projects, and finance those projects with these bonds that would be backed by road tolls. And of course, using road tolls for transit is a common practice. It's something Virginia is doing. It's something Pennsylvania does. It's something New York does. So there's definitely a well-worn path here for us to do that. There are other ways to fund rail investment, but this was, my idea, my offer, so to speak, about how to pay for some of these mega projects that we're so interested in, because unlike what the federal government did with their infrastructure bill, we need pay-fors to build things. We don't have a central bank. We don't have the ability to deficit spend. We need actual dollars to do these undertakings.
Now, so the relationship between the fund generated by the tolls and the state's transportation trust funds, how was that to work out?
Yeah, so right now, the toll revenue of our Maryland Transportation Authority is actually kind of an add-on to our trust fund. It's not actually in the mix of revenues in our trust fund. Our transportation trust fund is made up primarily of federal dollars, of which we get quite a bit, thankfully, and even more right now. But in terms of local sources, it's the state gas tax, it's titling fees, other miscellaneous motor vehicle administration fees, and then a piece of the corporate income tax. That began under Governor O'Malley. We increased it last year. A piece of the corporate income tax goes into the trust fund.
Yes.
The toll revenue is really off to the side. It's not intermixed with those other dollars. And right now it's only used within sort of the toll authority. Now it can be cross-subsidized. Money for that's generated at the Harbor Tunnel, which is a very high yield toll facility, can be used to build and maintain the 95 North express lanes. But that money currently is not used to pay for Maryland Transit Administration light rail repairs in Baltimore City. This would increase the tolling and then actually siphon some of that money off for some other non-toll road related purposes, specifically these mega rail and transit projects.
Well, we'll make sure that our audience knows that we're speaking about the your lead sponsorship of the Maryland Rail Investment Act of 2023. That's HB 74. Now, I do want to bring this to your attention, and this has been the subject of some discussion just recently. That is, page 11, you can find the reference to the red line and its definition. We sort of want to talk about that with you, perhaps in greater detail following our discussion today, but there's a red line reference in the East-West corridor study, but there's also the red line that was fully funded, fully approved, and received the record of decision. They're not quite referring to the very same transit project. And so we want to sort of speak about that further and make sure that we're sort of on the same page with which red line are we identifying.
So, I live by the other red line, right? I'm in Montgomery County. So I certainly defer to folks in Baltimore about what red line it is they want to build. I think what's important right now is I think there's pretty broad consensus, at least among Democrats in the House and the Senate and on the second floor of the governor's office, that we want an east-west transit connection in Baltimore City. I'm going to allow folks in Baltimore City to say exactly what that should look like, exactly how that should be defined, if it should be in this bill or somewhere else. Obviously, that's a broader discussion than just, page 11, line 7 through 10 of this bill.
And we look forward to speaking to you further about it. But at this point, I would like for you to let our audience know who are listening and who want to hear more about you and this bill. But how can our audience, allies, help to assure passage of this bill?
Sure. So first of all, let me give a shout out to Senator Jim Rosapet from Prince George's and Anne Arundel counties. He's the Senate cross-file. I'm actually not sure, as we're sitting here recording this, if he's had his hearing yet. So of course, the first opportunity is through the hearing process to, weigh in support. And then beyond that, it's just writing your state legislators, talking not only about this bill, although I appreciate the support for the bill, but I think the overall concept that we want to make these mega investments. It's really important that colleagues around the state hear from people and hear about the value of these things. Even if you don't live next door to it, it has a value. And I'll just give you an example. There are about, pre-COVID, I should say, there were about 10,000 riders a day on the DC Metro system from Anne Arundel County. The DC Metro system doesn't get that close to Anne Arundel County, but people find their way onto it because DC draws in a lot of folks from around the region. There are about 7,000 folks a day from Frederick County who were riding the DC area metro system pre-COVID. In some cases, we have more riders from non-Montgomery, non-Prince George's County and Maryland on the DC metro system than a lot of our Maryland transit lines get. So it just shows the value of these investments beyond just the immediate areas that affect them. So if you live in Howard County, maybe Howard's a bad example because there are some east-west ideas that go there. But if you live in Hartford County and you drive on the roads, you should also support transit projects in our big city areas like Baltimore City, because that draws cars that will be in front of you on the highways off the road. And of course, creates a lot of economic and environmental and equity benefits as well. So wherever you live around the state, I would encourage you to weigh in support of transit investment throughout the state. And of course, we have some particular projects right now. We know where they are that are sort of the next in line. But once we have those online, there'll be more projects that we need in the future. And we need a broad, as you know, statewide coalition of folks supporting transit options.
Mm-hmm. And we join you in this. In fact, we join you in the vision that your activism and advocacy, as well as this bill, projects. That is a vision in which we take advantage of the opportunity now, since we can, with the federal and state administration that are transit friendly, but to build out an equitable, reliable transit system for the state, anchored by rail. In fact, we know that from the past 8 decades with rail and transit-oriented development, that rail is the most robust generator of economic development and transit-oriented development. And so we want to see, along with you, what we're now calling the realization of Maryland's future. And we think that your bill, the Maryland, Rail Investment Act, fits into and helps promote a vision of that type.
Yeah, and thankfully, there's a lot of other legislators working really hard on these issues. As you know, we now have a bipartisan, bicameral transit caucus. It's currently led by Delegate Solomon and Senator Young, but we have lots of active members from the Baltimore area as well. Delegate Ruth from Baltimore County is on the board. Delegate Robin Lewis is one of our most active members. So we've got a lot of great folks with a lot of different bill ideas as well, working on these issues, which is a really positive evolution, over the past few years.
Excellent. I think that we do have a lot to work with, and there's a lot of energy in the Assembly in support of this and other rail projects, not only the Red Line and system in Baltimore region, but the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit projects. Yep. Then you see we also have visions, and advocates have visions of the MARC being extended to places like Frederick, Martinsburg, Elkton. I mean, there's so much to do, but we do need to make sure the governor had that support for developing that kind of system for the state.
Yeah, no, we've had great partnership from Western Maryland, actually, which is, as you know, largely Republican now, but they are excited about the idea of extending MARC rail service to places like Hagerstown.
Yes.
And so that has brought them into sort of the coalition about MARC rail improvements generally, which is, it's important to my county because of the Brunswick line, but extremely important to Baltimore City because of the other 2 lines. One runs, to Baltimore City, the Camden line, and one runs, through Baltimore City, the Penn line. So really important to have such a broad geographic coalition, supporting MARC rail investment, and would love to see that grow out further. Well,
good. Delegate Marc Korman, we are very glad at the Baltimore Transit Equity Coalition to have you as our guest today in our first program of Transit Equity Matters. And we want to give you the last word before we end our conversation.
Well, I just appreciate your work and the work of so many others in the Baltimore area and beyond. And again, what's been great about it is, yes, we gather together around specific projects, and your advocacy for the Purple Line down my way is well noted. And then we, are able to support each other's projects, and then look at some of the broader issues that affect, the whole state, and continue the cooperative, again, geographically diverse partnership, because that's the only way to get anything done. If every region was just fighting for itself, there wouldn't be a lot of progress. So really appreciate your partnership and advocacy.
And thank you so much again. I'm Samuel Jordan. I'm saying goodbye for this brief discussion with Delegate Marc Korman, the new majority leader in the House of Delegates. And we will remind you to watch this station, because we will speak more about transit equity matters. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.